The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves as we made our way deeper into the woods. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving only the dim glow of our flashlights to cut through the darkness. The crunch of twigs beneath our boots was the only sound aside from the occasional hoot of an owl in the distance. We shouldn't have come here. We all knew that. But sometimes, curiosity is louder than common sense. Started as a joke, really. Challenge between friends. "Let's go check out the old church in the woods," Matt had said, grinning as he leaned across the table at our usual late-night hangout. "You mean the one everyone says is haunted?" Jess scoffed, shaking her head. "No thanks." But I could see the hesitation in her eyes. The same hesitation we all felt. Because we'd heard the stories. The abandoned church wasn't just any old, crumbling building lost to time. It had a history, one soaked in whispers and warnings. Some said the congregation vanished overnight, leaving their belongings behind as if they had simply stood up and walked into the woods, never to return. Others believed something far worse had happened, something no one wanted to say out loud. Either way, the place had been left to rot, swallowed by nature, and avoided by anyone with an ounce of sense. But, of course, we weren't exactly known for making the best decisions. So there we were, standing at the edge of the trees, staring at the barely visible outline of the church through the thick fog that had begun to roll in. The wooden sign out front was weathered beyond recognition, the letters long faded. The steeple, once proud and towering, now leaned slightly to one side as if it were trying to escape whatever lay inside. Jess shivered. "This is stupid. Let's just turn back." Matt chuckled, reaching into his backpack. "Come on, we came all this way. Let's at least take a look inside." He pulled out a crowbar, and my stomach twisted. We weren't just peeking through the windows. We were going in. The heavy wooden doors groaned as Matt pried them open, the sound echoing into the night like a long, tired sigh. A gust of stale air rushed out, carrying with it the scent of dust, old wood, and something else. Something metallic. I swallowed hard, glancing at the others. No one spoke. The flashlight beams danced along the walls, illuminating peeling paint, warped pews, and an altar draped in a faded cloth. It was empty, just an abandoned building like any other. Except for the feeling. That heavy, suffocating feeling that wrapped around us the second we stepped inside. "Do you feel that?" Jess whispered, her voice barely audible. I did. It felt like we weren't alone. Matt took a few steps forward, his light sweeping across the room. "See, just an old church. Nothing to." His words cut off abruptly as the beam of his flashlight landed on something at the far end of the room. Door, slightly ajar, and behind it movement, shadow. Something was in here with us. Matt froze, his flashlight beam trembling slightly as it stayed locked on the half-open door. None of us spoke. None of us moved. The air felt thick, like the weight of the building itself was pressing down on us, waiting. Then the door shifted. Just a little. Not a slam, not a sudden burst of movement, just a slow, deliberate inch. Like something on the other side was listening, watching. Jess let out a sharp breath. "We need to go," she whispered, gripping my arm. Her nails dug into my skin, but I barely noticed. Matt, of course, had other ideas. "It's probably just the wind," he muttered, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. He was scared. Could hear it. But he stepped forward anyway, because that's the kind of person he was, always needing to prove he wasn't afraid. "Matt, seriously," I said, keeping my voice low. "This place has been empty for years. Just because the door moved doesn't mean." The door creaked again. This time it wasn't just a slight shift. It opened a few more inches, revealing nothing but pitch-black darkness beyond. No wind. No breeze. Nothing to explain why it moved at all. A deep silence filled the church. Even the sounds of the forest outside seemed distant now. Muffled, like we had stepped into a space where time didn't work the same way. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Matt turned his flashlight toward us, his face pale in the dim glow. If something was in there, wouldn't it have come out by now? Jess shook her head violently. Or maybe it's waiting for us to go in. That thought sent a chill through me. For a long moment none of us spoke. Then, against every instinct in my body, I took a step forward. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to know. The closer I got to the door, the stronger the feeling became. The sensation that something was just beyond my vision, just past the threshold, waiting. My breathing felt too loud in the silence. My flashlight barely seemed to cut through the darkness ahead. Matt was right behind me, and Jess followed reluctantly, hugging herself as if that could protect her from whatever we were walking into. The door was old, its paint peeling away in long, curling strips. I could see where someone, years ago, maybe decades, had scratched into the wood. The carvings were jagged, uneven. Letters, numbers, a date, a name. I couldn't tell. The words were barely visible, swallowed by time. I reached out, fingers brushing against the wood. It was ice cold. And then, sound, a whisper, came from inside the room. I yanked my hand back like I had been burned, my pulse pounding in my ears. I turned to the others, searching their faces, waiting for someone to say they hadn't heard it, that my mind was playing tricks on me. But Jess's eyes were wide with terror, and even Matt looked shaken. "You heard that," I said, my voice barely above a breath. No one answered. We didn't need to. Matt swallowed hard and tightened his grip on the flashlight. "We go in together. Just a quick look." Jess shook her head, stepping back. No way. This isn't funny anymore. I never said it was." Matt's voice was serious now. No more bravado. Just stubbornness. "We're already here. If we leave now, we'll just end up wondering what was in there for the rest of our lives." Jess shot me a desperate look, pleading. "You don't have to do this." And she was right. I didn't. None of us did. But my feet were already moving. The door opened with a groan, revealing a long, narrow hallway lined with rotting wooden beams. The walls were covered in a dark substance. Mold, maybe, or something worse. The air was colder here, the kind of cold that settled into your bones and stayed there. The whispering had stopped, but the silence felt worse. I stepped inside, and the floor creaked beneath me. Dust swirled in the beam of my flashlight. I could hear Matt and Jess just behind me, their footsteps hesitant. The hallway stretched further than it should have. From the outside, the church hadn't looked this big. But inside, the corridor seemed endless, fading into darkness. "Something's not right," Jess whispered. She wasn't wrong. A door stood at the end of the hall, slightly ajar like the one before it. The feeling in my gut told me not to go any further, that we had seen enough, that it was time to turn back. But Matt kept walking. I should have stopped him. I should have grabbed his arm, yanked him away, and dragged him out of that place. But I didn't. Followed. The floor groaned beneath us as we approached the door. My breath felt tight in my chest, my heart a constant, thunderous beat. And then, noise. Not a whisper this time. Not something soft and distant. Thud. From the other side of the door. Heavy, deliberate thud. Jess whimpered. "Matt, please." But Matt's hand was already on the door, and he pushed it open. The door groaned as it swung open, revealing a room swallowed in darkness. The beam of Matt's flashlight cut through the thick air, illuminating dust particles that swirled like tiny ghosts. The space beyond was small, more like a storage room than anything else. The walls were lined with broken wooden shelves, their edges splintered and jagged. An old chair sat in the corner, its legs uneven, as if someone had abandoned it mid-sit. But what really caught my attention, what made my stomach twist, was the trapdoor in the center of the floor. It was slightly open. A sliver of blackness gaped beneath it, leading to who knows where. The thud we had heard. It had come from below. Jess took a step back. "Nope. No way. We are not opening that." Matt hesitated for a moment, his fingers tightening around the flashlight. I could tell he was fighting an internal battle, the same one we all were. Every instinct screamed at us to leave, but something about that trapdoor pulled at us, whispering for us to look inside. I crouched down, trying to get a better look. The wood around the opening was old and damp, the edges worn as if it had been opened and closed hundreds of times. My flashlight barely touched the bottom, if there even was a bottom. It was just a pit of shadows. "Hello," Matt called out. His voice echoed, bouncing off unseen walls. Silence. Creak. Not from above. Not from around us. From beneath. Jess let out a shaky breath. "That's it. I'm leaving." She turned on her heel, heading straight for the hallway. I almost followed her, but Matt was still standing there, staring at the trapdoor. "There's something down there," he said. His voice was quiet, almost like he was speaking to himself. I shook my head. "That's exactly why we should not be here." He didn't move. Something was off about the way he was looking at it. His usual smirk, his casual arrogance, it was gone. There was something almost transfixed about him. Like he wasn't hearing us anymore. "Matt," I said again, grabbing his shoulder. He blinked, snapping out of whatever daze he had fallen into. Yeah, okay." But as we turned away, as we started toward the exit, a new sound crawled up from the depths. A whisper. Not words. Not anything we could understand. Just the soft, drawn-out sound of something breathing. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Jess broke into a run, and I didn't hesitate to follow. Matt, for once, didn't argue. We rushed back through the hallway, our footsteps pounding against the wooden floor. The air had changed. It felt heavier now, like we were wading through something thick and unseen. My flashlight flickered, and for a split second, the corridor felt longer than before. Something was wrong. We reached the main church hall, the rows of rotting pews stretching before us like silent witnesses. The open doorway leading outside was just ahead, but before we could make it, the church bell rang. Loud, deafening. A deep, shuddering clang that made my ribs vibrate. It was impossible. There was no bell. The tower had collapsed years ago. We had seen it from the outside. The sound sent shockwaves through my skull, and as it faded, I swore I could hear something else beneath it. A distant shuffle. The sound of footsteps, coming from the hallway we had just left. Jess let out a strangled cry. "Run!" I didn't need to be told twice. We bolted for the exit, the darkness behind us pressing closer. The moment my foot hit the forest floor outside, I felt like I could finally breathe again. The air was cold, but it was real. Jess was shaking. Matt was pale. No one spoke. We stood there, staring at the open church doors, expecting someone to step out. But nothing did. The silence that followed was worse. The kind that makes you feel like you left something unfinished. Like something was waiting. And then Matt did something that made my blood freeze. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. Something I knew he hadn't been holding before. Rusted. And tied to it, a tag. Faded letters scratched into the surface. Basement. Matt stared at it, then at us. He shook his head, his expression unreadable. "I don't know how I got this. None of us did. But we all knew one thing for sure. That key didn't belong to him. It belonged to whatever was still inside." Matt turned the key over in his hands, his breathing uneven. The tag dangled from it, swaying slightly in the night breeze. None of us spoke. None of us moved. There was no reason that key should have been in his pocket. He hadn't picked it up. He hadn't touched anything. Jess took a slow step back, shaking her head. No. We're done. We're leaving. Right now." I wanted to agree with her. Every part of me was screaming to walk away, to pretend none of this had ever happened. But then I looked at Matt's face. He wasn't scared anymore. He was thinking. Calculating. He looked back at the church, then down at the key again. "We have to go back," he said. Jess let out a hysterical laugh. "Are you insane? Did you not just experience what we all did?" Matt didn't even glance at her. His eyes stayed on the key. "Something gave this to me. That's exactly why we shouldn't go back." Snap. "Matt, you didn't just find that key. It was put in your pocket. Think about that. He looked up at me, his face unreadable. I am thinking about it. I felt my stomach drop. Before I could argue further, he turned and started walking back toward the church. Jess grabbed my arm. We can't let him go in there alone. I wanted to say let him go, but I knew I couldn't. Matt was stubborn, but he was also our friend. If we left him now, we'd never forgive ourselves. Jess swallowed hard. We get him. We drag him out. And then we never talk about this place again. He nodded. Then we followed him back inside. The moment we stepped through the church doors, it felt different. The air was thicker, heavier, like the walls were pressing inward. The pews looked darker somehow, as if the shadows had deepened in the time we'd been gone. Matt stood at the hallway entrance, staring into the blackness. He didn't even turn when we approached. I just need to see, he said. His voice was too calm, too steady. Jess clenched her jaw. Matt, I swear. He stepped forward. I followed, my pulse hammering in my ears. The hallway stretched ahead, longer than I remembered. The air colder than before. It wasn't just silence this time. There was something else. Faint noise. Soft, distant ticking. Like a clock. We reached the small storage room. The trapdoor was still open. The darkness beneath it looked bottomless. Matt knelt down, gripping the key so tight his knuckles turned white. He hesitated, then slid it into the rusted lock on the floor. The second it clicked, the air in the room shifted. The whispering returned. Not distant this time. Close. Right behind us. Jess spun, her flashlight beam darting across the room. No, she breathed. The shelves were no longer empty. Books lined the wooden planks now. Old, rotting, their spines crumbling with age. A thick layer of dust covered everything, but there were handprints in it. Fresh. As if someone had just touched them. Matt reached for the trapdoor handle. Jess grabbed his wrist. Matt, stop. Creaks sounded from below. Something was moving down there. Matt didn't stop. He pulled the trapdoor open the rest of the way. The whispering stopped. The ticking stopped. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Hand. Not reaching up. Holding the edge of the opening. Fingers curled over the rotting wood. Bill. Too long. And then, slowly, so slowly, it began to pull itself up. Jess screamed. I grabbed Matt, yanking him back. The thing, whatever it was, froze. And then it spoke. Not in a whisper this time. In a voice that sounded like ours. Don't go. I didn't wait to see more. We ran. Out of the room, down the impossibly long hallway, through the church doors and into the woods. We didn't stop. Not until the church was out of sight. Not until we could finally breathe again. And when we did, Matt's hands were empty. The key was gone. We stood there, gasping for breath, the cold night air burning in our lungs. The trees loomed around us, silent and unmoving, as if the entire forest was holding its breath. None of us spoke. We were too shaken, too stunned by what had just happened. Then Matt looked down at his empty hands. The key, he muttered. Jess turned on him. Forget the key, Matt. Are you kidding me? Did you not see that thing? Matt didn't answer. His hands flexed like he was trying to feel the weight of something that wasn't there anymore. His face had gone pale, but his expression wasn't fear. It was frustration. We shouldn't have run, he said. I stared at him. Are you serious right now? Jess let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. You wanted to see whatever was down there. Matt hesitated. I don't know. Maybe. Jess grabbed his arm. Listen to me. Something put that key in your pocket. Something wanted you to open that door. And now it's gone. Do you get that? We're not going back in there. Matt opened his mouth to argue, but then we heard it. The sound of footsteps. Not from the church. From the woods. Coming closer. I turned, my flashlight beam shaking as I swung it in the direction of the noise. The trees stretched on endlessly, their gnarled branches twisting into the sky. The undergrowth rustled, but there was nothing there. Jess clutched my sleeve. Tell me you see that. I squinted. The trees weren't just trees anymore. The gaps between them were wrong. Too narrow, too dark. Like there was something standing there, blending into the shadows, watching us. Then a voice called out. Not a whisper. Not a growl. Just a voice. Familiar. Matt's voice. Guys! We all froze. The voice had come from inside the woods. Jess turned to Matt, who was standing right next to us. Matt's face drained of color. That's not me. A shiver ran down my spine. My flashlight flickered, and for a brief second, I swore I saw something move between the trees. Shape too tall, too still. Then it called again. Guys, where are you? It was Matt's voice, but it was wrong. Tretch. Hello. Like an echo of something that had been said a long time ago. Jess grabbed my wrist, her nails digging into my skin. We're leaving. Now. I nodded, but Matt didn't move. He was staring into the darkness, his body tense. What if? His voice cracked. What if that's me? Chill ran through me. What do you mean? He swallowed hard, his fingers twitching at his sides. I mean, what if I never left that place? Jess let out a shaky breath. No. We are not doing this. But Matt wasn't listening. He took a step toward the trees. Jess grabbed his arm. Matt, stop. But the voice called again. Come back. We need to finish this. The trees shifted, and this time we all saw it. A figure stepping forward. It looked like Matt. It was wearing Matt. Same hoodie, same jeans. But its movements were off. Too smooth, too fluid, like it wasn't used to walking. Its head tilted. Its eyes locked onto Matt with an eerie stillness. Then it smiled. And in its hand it held something. Key. Jess yanked Matt back, and we all stumbled away from the edge of the trees. My chest was tight, my pulse hammering so hard I could barely think. The figure, Matt's figure, took another step forward. Then another. Jess turned and ran. Go! I grabbed Matt's wrist, and this time he didn't fight me. We tore through the woods, the branches whipping at our faces, the undergrowth clawing at our legs. The sound of footsteps followed us. Too many, too fast. The trees blurred past us. The church faded into the distance. We ran, lungs burning, until finally, the road came into view. We didn't stop until we reached the car. Jess fumbled with the keys, hands shaking so badly she could barely get the door open. We practically dove inside, slamming the doors shut. The silence was deafening. No footsteps, no whispers, nothing. We sat there, gasping for air, staring out into the woods. The trees stood still. The church was gone. And blinked. Well, not gone. It just wasn't where it had been. The building had shifted. Further back, deeper into the trees, like the forest had swallowed it whole. The windows were dark. The doorway empty. And standing just at the edge of the woods, barely visible in the shadows, was Matt. Or the thing wearing his face. Smiling. Holding the key. Then slowly it lifted a hand. And waved. Jess turned the key in the ignition. Her hands trembling so badly that it took 2 tries before the engine roared to life. The headlights flashed on, cutting through the dark, illuminating the road ahead. None of us spoke. None of us moved. We just stared at the figure standing at the edge of the woods, watching us. Still looked like Matt. Same clothes, same posture, but the way it stood, too still, too patient, was all wrong. Then it stepped forward. Jess slammed the car into reverse. The tires screeched as she whipped the car around, gravel spitting beneath the wheels. I twisted in my seat, heart pounding as the figure in the trees took another step, then another, each one slow and deliberate. It wasn't chasing us. It didn't need to. It knew we weren't escaping. We tore down the road, trees blurring past the windows. Matt sat in the back, his head in his hands, breathing hard. I turned to him. You okay? He didn't answer. Jess didn't slow down until we hit the highway, the forest finally giving way to open road. Only then did she let out a shaky breath and glance at me. What was that? I didn't know how to answer. Because I didn't know. Matt finally looked up. His face was pale, his eyes hollow. "I think it let us go." Jess scoffed. "Let us go? You think that thing had a choice?" Matt didn't say anything. The drive back to town felt longer than it should have. The roads were too empty, the night too quiet. It was like the world outside the church didn't know what we had just been through. We pulled up to my apartment first. None of us moved right away. Jess tapped the steering wheel, her jaw tight. "We're never talking about this again," she muttered. I nodded, but I knew the words were empty. I got out of the car, still feeling the weight of something pressing against me, as if the night itself was holding its breath. The headlights cast long shadows against the pavement. Jess gave me a tight nod before pulling away, taking Matt with her. I watched the taillights disappear down the road, and only then did I let out a slow, shaky breath. I was exhausted, but I knew I wasn't going to sleep. I locked my door the second I stepped inside, checking it twice, then 3 times. Every window, every light. I needed to convince myself that I was safe, that it was over. But then my phone buzzed. Message from Matt. "You home?" I frowned. That was fast. You. No answer. Then, a second later, another text. "Come outside." I stared at my screen. My stomach twisted. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but before I could reply, another message came through. "Please, I need to show you something." Something was wrong. I walked slowly to the window, pushing the curtain aside just enough to see the street below. Matt was standing there, alone. His hood was up, his hands shoved into his pockets. He wasn't moving, just standing under the streetlight, his head tilted slightly upward, like he was looking directly at my window. I swallowed hard. My phone buzzed again. "Don't let me in." My breath caught in my throat. I looked back down. Matt was still there. Then he smiled. And he lifted his hand, holding the key. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. Matt stood under the streetlight, his face shadowed, that same unsettling smile stretching across his lips. And in his hand, the key gleamed under the dim glow. My phone buzzed again. "That's not me." My chest tightened. My fingers went numb. I read the message over and over, my brain refusing to process what it meant. My hands shook as I typed a reply. "Where are you?" No answer. I looked back out the window. The Matt standing outside hadn't moved. His posture was too stiff, too wrong, like a puppet waiting for someone to pull its strings. Then he took a step forward. I stumbled back from the window, my heart hammering so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. The air in my apartment felt thick, suffocating. My mind screamed at me to do something, but my body refused to cooperate. Another step. Then another. My phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look, but I forced myself to. "Don't open the door." My stomach churned. My knees felt weak. I backed away from the window, barely able to breathe. The streetlight flickered outside, casting shifting shadows against my walls. Knock. Patient. I clamped a hand over my mouth, swallowing a gasp. My door was locked. I knew that. I knew it. But suddenly it didn't feel like enough. Another knock. I squeezed my eyes shut. I could hear my pulse in my ears, an erratic, panicked rhythm. Then a voice. "Hey, it's me." Matt's voice. Exactly like before. "I left something in your car." Casual, almost amused tone. "Can you grab it real quick?" I pressed myself against the wall, shaking my head even though he couldn't see me. Another knock. "I saw your light on, dude. Just open up." It was so normal, so convincing. But I knew better. I forced my hands to move, fumbling for my phone with numb fingers. My vision blurred as I dialed. The phone rang once. Then someone picked up. "Hello." It was Matt. The real Matt. My throat tightened. I could barely get the words out. "Where are you?" Then, at home. "Why?" My knees almost gave out. I gripped the edge of the table for support, my whole body shaking. "There's someone outside," I whispered. "Someone who looks like you." Silence. Then, in the quietest voice I'd ever heard from him, "Don't open the door." I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my back harder against the wall. The knocking stopped. I didn't dare move. I didn't dare breathe. The silence stretched on, thick and unnatural. The step. Slow, deliberate, fading into the distance. Counted the seconds. 20. Full minute. Then, finally I crept to the window. The streetlight buzzed softly. The pavement was empty. Matt, or whatever had been pretending to be him, was gone. I sank to the floor, my hands still trembling, my body exhausted from the weight of terror pressing down on me. Matt was still on the line. I could hear his breathing, uneven and tense. "Lock everything," he muttered. "I'll be there soon." I didn't argue. I double-checked every lock, closed the blinds, turned on every light in the apartment. Even then, I felt exposed, like something was still watching me from just beyond my vision. Matt arrived 15 minutes later. When I finally let him in, I could tell he hadn't stopped shaking either. Neither of us spoke at first. We just sat there, staring at nothing, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on us. Jess called a little while later. She hadn't seen anything, but she'd had a nightmare. She didn't tell me what it was about. And I didn't ask. None of us slept that night. We tried to move on. We really did. But things were different after that. The key was never found. The church, if it had ever really been there, was gone. We even tried going back in daylight, but the road didn't lead where we remembered. The trees were different. The air felt different, like the place had never existed. But I knew better. Matt knew better. And some nights when the world goes quiet, I still hear it. Knock. Patient. Waiting.